We always encourage you to like, to share, subscribe. That's OB-GYN Chats, where we unpack conversations that are needed the most. And who better to ask than the experts themselves? We are joined by Dr. David Mbula. Welcome again.
Hi, Ilke. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. The next topic, it's always that debate, and we love unpacking the uncomfortable conversations because we inform those that are watching. I think we should start by elaborating what does informed consent mean?
So informed consent can be defined as a process. It's not really one. So it's a process by which a medical healthcare practitioner then shares the information related to a medical proposed medical intervention, and then the patient then agree to that proposed medical intervention. So that is what it literally means, and it has some various components that we refer to as components of an informed consent, and at least it contains three aspects, which is one is that is disclosure, and disclosure basically means that that is the obligation of the treating medical practitioner to give as much information related to the disease, related to the possible treatment options, and then the recommended treatment that is being given. Then the second one is that it speaks to then the capacity. And the capacity, this is where now the age comes in, who can make a decision to a medical treatment, and every adult person is regarded to be in a good mental capacity to give and comprehend and understand and give permission to the treatment.
Sorry, can we define the age on what adult means?
And that is what adult means. When it comes to medical intervention, there is a age cut of at least 18 to give consent to a surgical treatment. However, when it comes to medical intervention such as treatment or tablets, that age cutoff is 14. So anyone below the age of 14 is considered to be a child, and in that case, the child cannot make that. They do not have the capacity to make the decision. Between the age of 14 to 18, they can make decision related to medical treatment, but not to surgical treatment. When it comes to surgical treatment, between 14 and 18, they should be assisted by either their parent or their guardian. And then the last one of the three aspects that I spoke about is what we call that the patient must be voluntary when they make a decision related to treatment. It should not be seen as a coercion by the medical practitioner or by anyone else. So what you're trying to say is that if you tell the patient they must then, after giving them that information, and then believing that they understand in terms of the mental capacity, and that is where someone who is cognitively impaired also comes in. I think we'll highlight about that.
Yeah.
So that is where then they must now make that voluntary decision without any coercion and say, I understand what is wrong with me. I understand what is the medical treatment that is proposed, and I am going to go for this treatment. Or one can also make a decision to say, I'm not going to go for that treatment. Let me rather opt for the other option.
So let's go straight to that question. So not only somebody that's not in a mental capacity to do so, sometimes you have somebody that's a vegetable. We've seen court cases because some are not able to do the consent, something goes wrong in the surgery, and it becomes a battle with the family suing the healthcare system. So yes. What happens in those two instances?
So that is when then that is where we go back. It's always that whenever there is now an issue related to the medical legal litigation or cases, that is when we go back to the informed consent or informed decision. So we now go back and see where all these three tick boxes that are highlighted ticked off. One was the person given this information related to the condition or the disease. And then when we give information, not only one-sided offer, say if we operate you'll be fine. You must also tell the person that in the process of an operation, there are risks that are associated with any treatment. And the person must understand that although we as professionals are trained to mitigate the risk, to prevent the risks, there is always a possibility that with any operation or any treatment, including medications, that's why even recently, the classical example was the COVID vaccine that was being used, that you must also understand that there is possible risk. There are benefits, And that is what informed consent is all about, that you must really go into the details, looking at both what are the benefits and what are the possible harmful. So you go back and say, was that done in terms of the before there is a complication? And then you also then go as a person in the mental state capacity to make that decision. And that is where the issues of can someone make a decision while they are already critically ill, or who is now responsible to make that decision. That is where a third party consent comes in. For example, if someone is married and a patient is critically ill to a point where are not in a good mental capacity to make that decision, or a child who is not believed to be, especially when they are below 18, they are not in a good capacity to make, they are considered to not be good capacity enough to make that decision. Then in terms of marriage, then the spouse is the next one in line to make those decisions. In terms of the child, then the parents or the guardian are the next one to make those decisions. And equally so, these people, the parent, the spouse, and the children, the parents must be taken through that process of the benefits, the harmful, and then find out if all those were ticked. And then was the patient coerced? So if all those tick boxes were then ticked, then that is where now you take the medical litigation case can go further, whether there was negligence. And a complication does not necessarily mean that it is negligence. A complication is seen as one of the things that could be either you can have what we call anticipated complications, depending on the complication, on the disease, and say we anticipate complication, but through us being trained to mitigate and prevent complication, we can have a successful surgery, for example, without any complications. However, in the process, you can also then, in certain cases, you can end up with a complication, which you call, and you might have already anticipated and already explained to the patient that, look, these are the possibilities. You can also have what we call an anticipated complication, where you do not anticipate any complication, but however, in the process of a surgery, then you end up with a complication. And those are then the medical team can then, and the legal team can then come to say, was this an act of negligence, or it was just a complication that can happen to any other person. And then in that case, that is how then these cases are then settled out of court. Not necessarily always to look at it as if it's always negligence, and that is how that this informed consent is very critical. That before any intervention, the patients really are aware, and they hope. We also hope for the best with almost every medical intervention. But the truth of the matter is that there is always complications
and risks
involved in any, whether it's medications, whether it is surgery. And this does not only apply to surgery, even drugs that we give patients, simple medications. There's always attached side effects.
But doctor, let's clarify the air. So informed consent doesn't necessarily mean that if things go wrong, the healthcare system can't be blamed, because we've seen many saying, yes, we've signed, we've known there are risk factors, but some people still say that we need to hold the healthcare accountable because my mom just passed away, my father just passed away, etc. Where do we draw that fine line by understanding? Yes, we accept it, but the healthcare must be also liable, held responsible in a certain way. It gets tricky.
So that is where this issue that now complication versus medical negligence.
Okay.
So through now the process of now, because what happens in this case, if there's now say a medical litigation case or a complication, and the family really want to understand what happened, which they are entitled to understand exactly, and it's always an open process. So that now means that now needs to prove that there must have been some form of negligence. And the negligence, it is what is now seem to be now an act of which is now one must now be held accountable for the negligence, but not necessarily for the complication. So in that process, that is where now a third party can be brought in, then review and they look at the case and say, how was this patient managed?
Meaning the lawyers, the third party.
No. It should be someone at least the lawyers are the ones who obviously take the legal process, but there should be what we call an expert witness. Okay. And an expert witness should be someone who is at the level of the medical practitioner who was treating the patient. So in my case, I'm a gynecologist. So another gynecologist will be brought in to examine and say, okay, this is the case. This is how the patient was treated. was there an act of negligence in the process? And if you cannot prove that and say no, this is this complication could have happened in the hands of the best expert in the
It would have still
it would
resulted.
still have resulted possibly in a complication, or perhaps the clinician was negligent in a sense that was the clinician trained, having skills to do a certain operation, for example,
Yeah.
or what level of competency does the clinician have? And if I say no, this is a competent and trained clinician, and this could have happened. If you can't prove, then there is no really a level of negligence, and you can't really then say that the doctor was liable, because these are some of those things that we try to highlight and then to differentiate between negligence and complications. Complications can happen, but obviously they also now one can take back and say that, is this an inexperienced surgeon that was taking the operation? Should he have gotten someone maybe to assist him in this surgery? Was how many surgeries of this type that the surgeon has performed? Those are the aspects that now needs to be answered by the expert witness and say and give a comprehensive report based on the facts that are available. I don't, then the expert witness can rather say that here there is an act of negligence or there is no any act of negligence.
So it boils down to the evidence
Yes,
at the end
yes,
of the
most
day.
definitely, yes.
And this is where we're coming to also wrap up the conversation by saying, how do we prevent this from happening? Are we well informed as patients? Is the healthcare doing a lot to go through the nitty-gritties to avoid ending up in court if something wrong happens?
That's very important, and this is part of what we do at our practice, where we try to do health education. And health education is key for the patients, meaning that patients should be aware of their rights, number one, and they should also, they have an obligation to know every single detail about their disease. In other words, they should be the drivers of their disease, and then in a sense that what if a healthcare practitioner say you have ABC disease, you have all the right to have information about what could have caused the disease, what is my current level in terms of the disease, what is the future prognosis of the disease, and what should I do to prevent or to treat this current condition. And this forms part of that disclosure component, and that is part of the informed consent. And it is not only applicable to surgery, as I highlighted, it is any medication. If I diagnose you with high blood pressure, which does not require surgery as a management, part of our responsibility or duty of care as healthcare workers is to disclose information related to the disease as much as, but as a patient, you also have that responsibility to understand and know about your condition, to ask questions surrounding the conditions, because only if we can have that conversation and we try to bring you to an understanding of exactly what is going on, we are then able to come to that also understanding and say, this is now having given you understood the disease, we give you the treatment, then you are able to make those best treatment decisions to say, should I continue with the treatment? And that is the why we see patients are given treatment, they stop the treatment down the line because they are not really well informed.
Yeah.
And I think we need to do more. And the part of this is this health education series that we routinely do, so that patients, when they even come to the doctors, they also read up, they know about their condition. And it's a process. It's not even informed consent. It's not a once-off process. So I see you today. Then we have a part of the discussion. Maybe you go back home and go and do more research about the disease and about the condition.
And consult with the family. They also have opinions.
And then come back and then make that. Then you complete the process as a. So it's not only to say that I see you today and I say no, you have some this disease, I must operate you. Sign here. It's not about signature. It should be the process in which have at least those 3 tick boxes that must be.
I love how you put it, doctor. It's not only just the responsibility of the clinician, but also you as a patient to know your rights. You gave us information in terms of the scenarios that might happen when it comes to informed consent, but let's focus on the ethical aspect, just briefly in a nutshell. What is included ethically in terms of that informed consent?
So ethically, we as clinicians have there's what we call 4 principles of ethical when we talk of practicing medicine. And one, I'll just try to briefly mention them. One is beneficence, meaning that we should try not to do any harm. So it should, and this is very critical to informed consent, and I'll just wrap it up why it's critical. And then the other one is non-maleficence, which means we should do no harm as one of the basic principles. And then the other one is justice, meaning that whatever we do, we should also consider the next person. And justice is very critical, especially in the public sector, where we need to be conscious of the resources to make those decisions. How do we distribute the resources? So there must be fair distribution and justice of the resources. And the last one is autonomy. And autonomy is now from the patient. And it's all about, meaning that at the end of the day, we should respect the autonomy of the patient. And this is where the patient's part also comes in, knowing about their condition and making those decisions. And here, critically, I highlighted about that we should do no harm. And that is why one of the key ethical is that we should try not to coerce. For example, as a gynae, it should not be seen as an incentive for me to say that if I operate you, for example, maybe it should be seen as an incentive for monetary reason or economic purposes. So we should follow those, whatever we do within when we counsel patients about treatment options. It should not be seen the treatment option that is likely to give me seen as a monetary value, compared to, for example, if there are treatment options, you need to put these treatment options on the table, and the patient must now make a decision. You can recommend to say, in my opinion, this is my best, but not to. It should also be done at the professional level, not to be seen as is my opinion. And it should also not be seen. The patient should also not see it that if a doctor say, because sometimes the patient put it back to you to say, doctor, what will you do?
If what do you recommend, doc?
Yes, and then they use that as a recommendation. So it should also be seen that the patient must really understand both options, and then at the end of the day make a comprehensive decision. And one can recommend, but it should not be seen that if a doctor recommended it is the best.
Yeah.
So as a patient still you need to understand, read more, get more information. There's what we call patient information sheets for most of the diseases that for us in our practice, we routinely give this to patients to really read and understand. And we encourage them that if you have more questions, you're welcome to come back and consult again before you really make that final decision regarding your treatment.
And literally, it's a life or death situation and decision. Last but not least, we're wrapping up, doctor. How would you promote patient advocacy? And that's very important. And this is exactly what we're talking about: informing, educating, and empowering the patient to make those right decisions.
Patient advocacy is very important, and this is and especially we see this for example, in the space that we work in obstetrics. Say, for example, issues related to contraception and the type of contraception, such as sterilization. A woman will say that she feels like she doesn't want more children. She wants to make a decision to whether to close the tubes, which is a permanent form of contraception. But you say, no, I would want to seek my husband's consent. But from the medical point of view, if you are an adult, and what we are trying to discuss here is that if you are an adult who is perceived to be in a good mental state, you do not need a third party to give you permission or consent to agree to it. If you believe that you want to do a certain procedure, for example, you say that I'm done. Obviously, you need to involve your husband to say that I think I'm done. But it doesn't mean that if your husband say don't do it, then you shouldn't be doing it, because from the consent point of view, you make those medical decisions on your own. And the same goes, for example, if a patient is in the hospital, whether I'm married or not unmarried, they need to go for a surgical intervention. If the patient believes that I'm ready to do a surgery based on the information that I have from the patient, the doctor, or what I've read up, it should not be that the husband can come and say that, no, my wife is not going to get operated, as long as the patient. So those are some of the issues that really people that need to be aware of. And we also see it a lot in, for example, children who are minors, and legally they live with a guardian. And the guardian may say that I don't think my child must go for an operation. That from the legal point of view, there is also what we call the Child Care and the Protection Act, which may override if the medical practitioner feels that the surgery or any medical intervention is necessary, one can approach the High Court and
Do it on behalf
and
of.
be it on the behalf of the child, in the interest of the child.
Yeah.
So we really are encouraging our nation or as a country to read more, to understand what are their rights, what is the right, because at the end of what is the right of the doctor, what is the right, what is my right as a patient. Because I may recommend something, but you must also know your right that I don't agree with this, and or that is not in the interest of my healthcare. So these are some of the key aspects that we really think people need to be aware of, and really be take care and ownership of their health care.
Doctor, that's why we appreciate you. Kudos to you. You go through a lot. You've got a cape and you've got a lot of difficult decisions. Thank you so much, Dr. David.
Most welcome. Thank you for having me too.
You're welcome. So there you have it. Some yes or no, or my body, my choice. It's all about giving your comments on OB-GYN Chats. We'll be back with our next edition next month.